are joined by the mayor of Englewood, New Jersey, a man who also happens to be a former federal prosecutor and a 20-year immigration lawyer, Michael Wildes.
My next guest, he's Michael Wildes, a prominent attorney and former mayor of Englewood, New Jersey.
Mr. Michael Wildes. With us, immigration attorney Michaal Wildes.
Michael Wildes, what do you think of that opinion?
I also want to thank my friend Michael Wildes.
Hello, Michael. Unfortunately, we cannot be in your event, but don't forget my visa.
And many of us have great expectations for this gentleman here, am I right? We need him in the Congress at some time. We'll look forward to it.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here this evening. My name is Michael Wildes. It's an honor and privilege to be here at Binghamton's annual Social Equity Leadership Conference. Over time, I've had the privilege of following this program and have been inspired by the novel ideas that its participants present to work towards the promotion of social equity and governance. I stand here this evening excited to share my thoughts and experiences, yet I'm humbled by an audience of citizens, scholars, and practitioners who have helped make significant changes in our communities as a result of your collaborative efforts arising from this yearly event. Ladies and gentlemen, you could say it was in my DNA to become an immigration lawyer. My father, who started our law firm in the 60s, well before my mom and he started me, established a beautiful practice. In the 70s, he represented John Lennon from the Beatles and successfully got him a green card in a celebrated case. We have a practice in New York and New Jersey where we work exclusively on immigration matters. I previously had the honor of serving as a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and also honored to be placed in as a mayor of my city for 6 years and serve on a blue ribbon panel on immigration policy by a former governor of the state of New Jersey in 2007. In many ways, I've had a snapshot to see what it's like to deal with immigration, a chance to get rid of the bad guys, help the good guys stay, and evaluate from urban, suburban, and city spheres the experiences and journeys that immigrants undergo upon their arrival in our wonderful nation. Before launching into public laws and views, just know that there is a sense, for those of you that are familiar with our profession, of law that deals with the journey of the immigrant. What is immigration law? Immigration law is a system of laws enacted by Congress and implemented by several federal agencies governing the movement of foreign nationals to the United States, their rights, grounds of removal, eligibility for status, and work authority. It's the job of an immigration lawyer to get their client onto safe legal ground, ensuring that they, along their journey, get temporary visas, insulate them properly to get permanent resident, and then apply for citizenship. As a mayor, I've had many experiences in our culturally diverse city in New Jersey, that's Englewood, New Jersey, which enriched this journey, this experience in immigration. Together with both hats, I had the chance to help our former governor on an immigration panel in making recommendations that advanced the various overarching immigration concerns that had a direct impact on our local communities and our welfare as a nation. We encouraged bilingualism, immigrant integration, ensured opportunities for immigrants to participate in economic, social, political, and civic life of their states and various locales. And with regard to this evening's topic of discussion, I had a lot to say with regard to the balancing the hurdles that immigrants face who enter our communities with public safety concerns. What was once a localized problem has snowballed into a national concern. The plight that millions of immigrants throughout this country face with regard to poor housing and labor conditions in their communities severely burdens our already struggling economy. With Congress's continued inaction and deafening silence on these matters, our safety and security as a nation continues to suffer as well. The government needs to step in to enforce the great body of immigration laws that they already have and have simply not enforced, and cannot leave it up to the states to enforce when local authorities should instead be focused on building intelligence and confidence in the immigrant community, not severing it through the enforcement of ambiguous legislation or overreaching. As a result, two phenomena have occurred in our communities with greater frequency as more undocumented individuals cross our borders unsupervised. First is stacking. Throughout the U.S., a phenomenon known as stacking is prevalent among low-income immigrants, where housing complexes are overcrowded well beyond their legal capacities. These conditions drastically increase the risk of disease and fire hazards, and in my prior experience as mayor, Lives were lost during a fire where families stacked themselves into unfit living arrangements, placing first responders in harm's way and their family members. Unfortunately, given these harsh economic times, such tragedies have increased with greater severity. The second phenomenon were muster zones, which is another consequence of congressional inaction, which has a lot to do with the scores of day laborers collecting in these mourning or muster zones. These men and women often place themselves in harm's way by accepting dangerous positions, work in poor health conditions, low wages, often risking exploitation with little recourse. Local businesses profit from such cheap labor, which then creates two-pronged effect. First, the muster zones get larger and displace Americans from jobs. And second, the influx then leads to further stacking and an additional burden on our local law enforcement to protect against the threats that they may pose to the community. For example, they're resorting to crime and violence after not being picked up or paid properly for work. A common element between these two phenomena is that the majority of the immigrants who comprise them are mostly undocumented, having entered the country illegally, and once inside our borders, current federal law automatically makes them ineligible to ever lawfully obtain a driver's license, a visa, or otherwise, thus giving these individuals more reason to try to fly under the radar. As I alluded to earlier, one legitimate concern associated with an increasingly large undocumented immigrant populace is the risk associated with so many people living in the shadows. With so many people living invisibly, our national security is potentially threatened by unknown vulnerabilities that could always be exploited by others. The increased notoriety of our porous borders also incentivizes individuals and groups who are not seeking financial gain to enter our neighborhoods with the intent to harm innocent lives. The enormity of the problem has caused paralysis and political impotence for years, but the tragic events of September 11th were the catalyst for grassroots efforts to force Congress to confront the immigration issue comprehensively and publicly. However, nearly a decade later, the government's response has been insufficient. While the United States military plays a significant role in some prevention efforts, such action by itself is like putting a Band-Aid on a cancer. The most powerful weapons we have to prevent terrorism from abroad are embedded in the United States immigration law. As an immigration lawyer who has dealt with terrorists and defectors to ensure that they provide the U.S. intelligence community with difficult-to-attain information on terrorist activities, my job utilizes immigration law to battle an elusive enemy ensconced in secrecy. For example, we have had students, clerics, and diplomats guising themselves in visa status and were vulnerable. You have religious clerics that profess religion, and yet they've funneled monies through 501c3 tax-exempt organizations, and you have foreign students that enter but have never yet set foot in a college, university, or institute. With millions of illegal aliens living clandestine lives in our nation, any effort to document them is doomed to failure if it doesn't contain a reasonable opportunity for them to achieve citizenship at some point. Drawing the many hardworking worthy out of the darkness is the only way to shine a light on the unwanted dangerous few. Think about it for a moment. We have maybe 7,000 ICE agents. We have about 200 immigration judges and about 20 million individuals here. The problem here is that absent a few exceptions, current and previous administrations have failed to act effectively and efficiently to cure this problem. They have gone into stagnation that has consequences. In fact, the last comprehensive immigration reform this country has seen was back with President Reagan in 1986, where he required employers to attest to their employees' immigration status and made it illegal to knowingly hire unauthorized workers. Finally, President Reagan granted amnesty to certain seasonal agricultural workers and to undocumented individuals who had entered the U.S. before January of '82 and resided here continuously. In the ensuing years, other administrations increased legal immigration and accounted for American safety by broadening the range of deportable crimes. President Clinton created the 10-year bar that looked awfully Republican but had significant effect and consequence. Again, still, given the steadily rising influx of families crossing U.S. borders and the outstanding impact immigrant labor has had on our struggling economy, the federal government has been lagging to account for these notable changes, and as a result, our nation's economy, our nation's security, more importantly, and our global reputation have suffered in response. Washington has not changed its broken system because they are unable to speak out against anti-terrorism laws and immigration reform consistently with one another. They look weak if they are strong on immigration, on the war on terrorism. They have gone, therefore, radio silent. Lovely speeches, nice touches, no action. They talk, but they don't walk. In response, local officials are trying to negotiate with the U.S. immigration authorities and Homeland Security to deputize their law enforcement personnel to enforce federal immigration laws. Specifically, Section 287G allows the federal government to grant immigration enforcement authority to state agents. While this plan seems like a viable solution to deal with illegal entrants, the strategy is ultimately unsound and fundamentally at odds with our national heritage, which gives exclusive jurisdiction to the federal government to address immigration matters. As a practical matter, piling the additional duty of immigration enforcement, forensics, documents upon our already strained local police will do little more than force illegal immigrants and those who associate themselves into further society's shadows. The negative effect which results thereof are significant. We see undocumented immigrants who have been victims of crimes will not avail themselves of police protection in fear that they may be deported and will be less likely to offer information or cooperate with police out of fear about their immigration status. The result, increased crime and decreased intelligence. Second, police resources will be drained trying to address this problem instead of focusing their efforts on fighting crime. The immediacy of a police response to a crime report is absolutely vital to maintain peace and security in our communities. And finally, enforcing immigration laws on a local level drastically increases the risk of racial profiling. We see recently where the Supreme Court issued a decision a few weeks ago which permitted Arizona to punish employers who are found guilty of knowingly hiring undocumented workers, a decision that's directly at odds with the exclusive right of the federal government to regulate immigration. While the Arizona law would act in concert and impose burdens, it would be imposing additional burdens upon lawful employers and consequently leading those employers to erect ever-strong safeguards against the hiring of unauthorized aliens without counterbalancing protection against unlawful discrimination. Moreover, the taxpayers will be hit hard for the state to try and uphold this legislation, and consequently, law enforcement will almost certainly be exhausted, given the enormity of the undocumented immigrants. It's now abundantly clear that Congress finds itself incapable of coping with the comprehensive immigration reforms our country needs. Until we stop the rhetoric and address the problem of illegal immigration and the creation of an efficient program, America will not feel safe from the threat of violence spurred by the lack of jobs. They will not have faith in Congress in performing their essential role, and we will not have a thriving economy where a large portion of it relies on foreign labor. The government should be helping individuals. We saw with the DREAM Act where they couldn't even get together to help children by no act of their own who came into this nation, by the grace of God, were born to parents. And these children, we don't even want to help facilitate an education or have them join our military where they can contribute exponentially more to our society. This inertia, where they won't even address the children, is so upsetting. The ensuing consequences of decisions such as these inevitably outweighs its security interests and actually stunts our growth as a nation. Rather, the position that myself and my constituents take is to focus our energy and resources on utilizing the foreign potential in our territories rather than aiming to push it all away.